I'm sharing my process for some of our favorite things, watercolor flowers and handmade greeting cards, but this project has a little twist and you're gonna love it. Let's talk supplies really quickly here. Instead of using store-bought blank greeting cards, I am making my card today. So this is cold-pressed 140-pound watercolor paper. And here's the trick to making your own card out of paper. Watercolor paper, you want to fold it on the wrong side of the paper first. Use a ruler because it gets a bit of a rough edge on that first fold. Then fold that back in, the rough edge is hidden, and the front side or good side of the watercolor paper is facing out. And that's where we'll actually do our painting. And then you want some scrap watercolor paper as well to paint all the leaves and lilacs. So you create your card, grab scrap paper. We'll need a pencil and eraser, some watercolor paints. I'm using the Munyo 48-pan set as usual, 2 glasses of clean water, paper towel for blotting. And then I like to use a pointed round brush. Usually a number 3 or a number 4 is good for me. And if I wet it, you can see it comes to a nice fine point, which is great for detail work. Our cutout card starts with a little bit of prep work. You want to mark center and then draw a little jar or vase shape. For a mason jar, I like to do a couple horizontal lines and then just do this rounded square underneath them. And it just kind of makes this cute, whimsical mason jar shape. From there, once that's done, we want to start mixing up our colors, and it's pretty straightforward. For lilacs, you want a couple different purples. So I'm mixing my dark purple with a little bit of brown. I like to mix brown into my pinks and purples to mute them ever so slightly. The Munyo set has 2 purples, so I'm mixing up one of each, the darker and the lighter. Mix a bit of brown into both of those. And then I'll bring even more purple down here, and we're gonna throw a little bit of magenta in with that one to give us a really pinky purple, and same thing, a little bit of brown. From there, we'll get into some greens. I love to use this olive green, or there's another green called olive brown. Those are some favorites of mine. And then I love to mix the phthalo green with the olive brown, and that gives me a really nice natural green that I use over and over again. And finally, a little bit of brown there so that we can do kind of the stems of the lilacs. Okay, our prep work is done. Let's do some painting. So for the lilacs, we're not working on our greeting card. We are going to be painting on that scrap watercolor paper. And here's how I approach it. I start at the top of the flower, just painting these clustered little ovals. So really loose little brush strokes, just kind of hitting the page with the tip of that brush. You can see some areas are light, some are quite dark. And I'm creating this cone-shaped lilac flower. And as I come down and everything gets a little wider, I really let those brush strokes get messy. And I'm just doing a big cluster now. And you can get quite light with your paint and then add a little extra color in, and it just seeps out so beautifully. And you get that nice blending of light and dark purple. At any point, you could grab the brown and drag your brush through the purple area to make some little branches. And then, of course, we can add a few leaves as well. And the leaves, just 1 or 2 strokes of the brush, really organic, loose shapes. So we're keeping everything very loose and free. And if you're wondering why I stopped and then came back with stop the purple and then started again, it's just that I wanted the brown and purple to blend a little. So I didn't want all of that purple at the top to dry. Same thing here. I painted some more lilac blossom. So now I'll pick up that brown on my brush and I'll start adding a few more little stems and branches. And that way I get a nice blending of the brown and purple. Okay, let's paint another one. I mean, that's the general gist of how I approach these really, really loose, easy lilac flowers. For this one, I'm starting more with that magenta purple, that pinky purple. Starting at the top, a lot of little ovals, and then letting it get really loose as we come down towards the bottom of the page. adding little leaves in there, maybe picking up a bit more purple and just continuing this cone shape. At any point, we can grab that brown on the tip of our brush and put a few little branches through there. But that's kind of my formula for a very, very loose, whimsical lilac. We don't want to spend all day on these. You know, you might want to create 2 or 3 of these cards, and the lilac should look very, very simple. Lilacs are one of my favorite flowers, and I love to paint them, especially in this very loose, free style. But I think this card would be very successful with just about any watercolor flower or leaf. So, you know, you could switch this up and do the plant that you're comfortable with. Could be sunflowers. I thought of doing lavender actually, just because that would be so simple and straightforward. But in the end, I decided to go with our beautiful lilacs, and I think they're going to be so pretty, kind of bursting out of the mason jar. I ended up painting 3 of them all together on scrap pieces of watercolor paper. And then with the flowers all done, I just wanted to also paint a few sprigs of greenery so that we can frame the lilacs really nicely with these green leaves when we complete the card, when we put everything together. So just some really loose leaves there. And that is what I'll be working with. I've got 3 stems, 3 flowers, and I just need to let those dry and then cut them all out. So while those are drying, let's move on to our card. We drew that mason jar as part of our prep. Now I'm just using a bit of French gray. You can see it's quite watery on the palette there. And I am going to add that gray to the jar to give me a very sort of cloudy look. So I do it a little bit darker near the edges, and then I usually just use a damp brush to kind of blend and bleed everything out. I want there to be some darker spots, some lighter spots. At the top of the mason jar, I repeat those horizontal lines, but everything is quite loose here. Just make it a bit messy. And then I started to paint a stem or branch, and then I was like, wait, no, we should do that afterwards, and you'll see why, I think. So set that aside to dry now. The flowers and leaves should be dry. They don't take too long, and you can cut them out. I left a little bit of a white border around mine, so everything was just very loose. I didn't get really finicky with it. I wanted to have that little bit of white page, and there they are. It took 2 minutes to cut everything out. They're very perfectly imperfect, and we are ready to assemble our card. So let's grab the card. We'll place it on a cutting mat. Make sure to open it, of course. We're going to cut across the top of the mason jar. So use a ruler and a little paper knife or an X-Acto knife and just make a cut right across the top of the jar. Make sure it's gone through the paper all the way. You won't even be able to see it, but when we grab our leaves and flowers, we're able to place them into the slit that we just created. And it's not quite a pop-up card, but it creates this very dynamic, fun floral card that's so special. I mean, if you wanted to give this to someone for their birthday, I just think it makes such a statement. There's something about having the flowers cut out instead of just painted on the page that makes it seem so much more thoughtful and special, but it's really not that much more work. Once you're happy with the way it looks, just flip it over very carefully, and we're going to use a little bit of tape there to just make sure everything is in place. A little bit of washi tape or Scotch tape, and that is all we need to do. I think this is just looking so cute, and now we can put the stems in. So before, I would have just been putting them in randomly, and obviously they may or may not have lined up with the flowers once I actually put the lilacs on the top. So doing it this way, you can see exactly where each branch, is going into the jar, and you can make it look like it really is continuous. Just drag that brush across the page to make a messy line, a very broken line that's thick in some areas and thin in others. And then what I like to do is I'll use a damp brush to kind of muss up the lines a little so it looks like you're viewing the stems through the glass. But simple, don't do too many stems. And there is our card all done. This is such a fun project. On the inside, you could place a little piece of cardstock or colored paper there to cover that, but it is pretty discreet as well, so totally up to you how you'd like to finish this. It would look great with a message, but I also think it works beautifully as a blank card, and you can just write your message inside. So yes, my greeting card is all done. I'm super happy with this project. Good bang for your buck, as I often say. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you soon with a new tutorial.